Okay, so the very first report I'd like to take a look at here is one called Detailed Hours by Date. This is a time report that's in a tabular style. You can report on time in a variety of ways throughout the standard reporting utility of the product. So first we're going to go ahead and run this. And once Meredith has run this report, this will allow you to see whatever data you've specified that you want to see within the reporting menu, which we're going to go take a look at here in a minute. So what I've done first here is I've subtotaled by project all of the time that people have worked, also displaying people, what they actually did, what their pay category was, whether it was billable or non-billable, if that was going to be a user selectable field, as well as the total number of hours. The benefit of showing details is it gives you a tremendous amount of information. You can subtotal these by anything you want. You can subtotal by items such as dates, project, people, any of the other user selectable columns that you might find on a selection screen when a user actually fills out their timesheet, but also on any back-end data fields that you wish to specify relating to people, relating to projects, etc. So for example, if a user has a department or a manager and you wish to subtotal reports by that, you absolutely can do so. At the top of the screen in the center, you'll see a small link that says Modify this report. From the main reporting menu, you could have modified the report, or actually when you're running it, you can as well. This is where you stipulate the date range that you wish for the report to cover. In this case, I've selected 1 month from our drop-down list over here on the upper left-hand corner. Also, you could have specified to prompt for date entry when it was run, if it was going to be run for an illogical period, such as March 17th to July 25th. And as you go down the list, you can see there are various filters for filtering in or out different projects, activities, users, and so on. As you continue down the list here, you'll note that under Report Output Options, you have the capability of subtotaling by various fields of information. As you can see, I've selected one called Time Record Fields Project. If you click the drop-down list that says Time Record Fields, please note that you also have the capability of doing it on custom fields relating to your people or your projects and so on. So if we look at user custom fields, for example, you'll note that the list of applicable options to the right now changes and shows every single of the 25 or so HR data fields that we have on the background. So for example, if we wanted to run this by the person's location, and location was a specified field within the user profile, then we'd be able to see location by location exactly how many hours we worked for the duration of whatever this report happened to be. Now, please note, if you continue down the list, that there's a small link that says Show Details. If you go ahead and just like that, if you eliminate Show Details, instead of showing all those dates and having this report be 30, 40 pages long, it'll actually summarize things for you succinctly. So if we continue down to the bottom and click Save and Run Report, we've now saved the report in this format. If we wanted to have our old report retained and still have another report that looks simple like this in our list of available options, we absolutely can. So we can see in a nutshell here that during this month, about 2,265 hours were done in our Austin location, another 1,000 in our San Jose office, and a couple hundred in our Rotterdam office. If we go back and modify that report one more time and uncheck Show Details and rerun the report, it will give the detailed breakdown by the location of all of the time that our various people worked on the different projects associated with that location. And as I mentioned before, this will be an extremely long report, so there's a variety of ways of summarizing data. You can also do the same thing using matrix reports. So if we return to the main report list here, please note that we also support matrix reporting, which allows you to see things in a very simple fashion. Let's go ahead and do this for an expense report. In this case, let's go with expense totals user/project. So let's go ahead and run that report, please, Meredith. That's going to run this for the past month, and it's going to show me all of the expenses by person, by project for this specific time period. You can actually add percentages to this as well to see what your percentage breakdowns of expenses were by project or by person, or by any other two items that you choose to to fill out the X and the Y of the matrix. Meredith, if you continue back to the main reports page, let's take a quick look at total cost reports. So you'll probably need to expand this to view all reports. Please note that we've got about 3 dozen reports that are in the system by default that it comes with. You can make a limitless amount of reports on your own, as many of you already are well aware. But we have a total cost report in here, conveniently called total cost report. We're going to go ahead and run that. So what we've done here is we've collated either a time or a rate report. Rate reports are financial reports, along with expense reports. And as you can see here, this is giving me a giant list of all of my projects for the period that I chose to run this, which is actually the month of March. And as you can see, we've got hours shown in the first column after the project name, as well as the total billing value, which can be done by a variety of different calculations that occur on the back end relating to user or project rates and other variables that you might wish to provide. We'll go into that here in a little more detail in a minute, as well as what the cost or pay values happen to be for this, and the expenses associated. So as you can see, for example, with our document new internal requirements project, we worked 25 hours on it. We're a billable value of $2,217.50. We had expenses totaling $12,396, and that's giving us a total cost of $14,613. If we continue to scroll down, this is actually running 3 reports at the same time. So the top one we saw was the collated report. The second one we see here is a rate report that I've got where I'm taking a look at individual projects within a project, for example, business process review session, the 3 activities that people were doing, and then the various users that were actually working on those, along with the amount of time they worked, what they cost us, what their pay rate was effectively for that period, or cost rate if you prefer, and then the amount that we were able to turn into a bill. Please note the communications management project directly beneath there, we have an activity called management, which probably was either an unbillable activity or, for that matter, an unbillable project. Or perhaps the users were able to select that the project were billable or unbillable when they filled out their timesheets. Well, any one of these things could have then overridden the billing value with a $0 amount, since it was going to be fundamentally unbillable work that we're doing, yet we're still capturing the employee costs here. So as we can see, the cost for this 4-hour time period that we worked on communications management cost us $319.75. However, we're not turning this into a bill at all. If Meredith continues to scroll down to the bottom of the list here, you'll see the total for the month for everything that was incorporated in the report as we defined it initially, giving us grand totals of $64,000 in billing values, in cost values, $39,945, of which were able to be turned into bills. So looks like we need to get a little more billable revenue up here. Down at the bottom, it's actually taking the expense report that we pulled from and showing you that. So not only does it give you the collation of the 2 reports that you selected to appear within the total cost report, but it also shows you the details of the individual ones. Please keep in mind that you can use any time or rate report as well as any expense report to do this collation. If we go up to the top of the screen, where it says modify this report, in the modification area, it'll ask you which reports you wish to include. If Meredith clicks that drop-down, it will show you all applicable reports for time, and then the spot beneath it, all applicable reports for expenses that you could use. But it's going to be any one that you've created in addition to all of the ones that sort of ship with the product by default. Now, if we return to the top of the page, Journyx has a couple of ways of doing project reports. So in the core product, we have what we refer to as project status reports. So if we take a quick look at this one, and go ahead and run it, this will allow you to see all of the projects that you're working on, including the defined project work breakdown structure beneath it. So for example, on custom application development, as we can see, there are 2 dozen reports underneath it. 2 dozen different levels of the work breakdown structure underneath it that people are allowed to log time against. It's possible that no time is allowed against the custom application development project directly, and in fact that all time must be put at the lowest level of the WBS. Well, that being the case, that doesn't mean that you still can't get everything pushed up to the top level, and in fact, that's exactly what we've done here. So if you add up all the time that's been worked on these various projects, as you can see at the custom application development level, we've got a grand total of 565 hours because we're actually adding up all of the numbers beneath there. You can run this report to not do that as well and just show the time as it was logged against the specific project or task that a person was entering the time against on their timesheet, but this is a nice way to see it in a very simple and straightforward fashion. Now, project managers do have the capability of providing their subjective opinion as to how complete the project actually is. By doing so, they actually can recalibrate run rates of projects, in other words, change the budgeted total hours from the initial estimate. However, you are able to see the hours worked, the initial estimate, and the percent of estimate used without actually forcing your project managers to do this. Most people that actually care to have that degree of project management within our system would probably use our Project Execute or PX product. So if we take a look at some of the PX-specific reports, again, returning to the main reporting menu under Standard Reports, you'll be able to see that when we expand this to show all reports, that there are additional categories that we've added here. One's for scheduled project statuses, assignment reports, utilization reports, and billable forecast reports. So the first one we're going to take a look at here is going to be one called New Report, which is an assignment report. So let's go ahead and just run that real quickly. Now, the Project Execute reports allow a lot greater detail when it comes to getting information surrounding your projects. As we can see here, we're running this actually by user first, then showing all of the assignments, in other words, the things that these people are supposed to be working on as designated by project managers that searched out a resource and applied them to their project for some specific time period and duration. As we can see here, Alan Anderson, for example, has 16 scheduled hours on the 1.10.1.1 Develop FAQ Pages project that he was supposed to work on for a couple of days this month. It was covering a 7-day period, and we have no hours actually put in yet because this project has not actually begun. If we look at the one directly beneath it that started today, he's worked 2.5 hours on it. In fact, actually, he got started a little bit early on that project, so we can see his actual start date was earlier than necessarily it was designed to begin, and then we can see how much estimated work remains as well. So if we continue down the list of reports, returning to the main report menu, we can take a look at one of our utilization reports. Now, utilization, down here at the bottom, we're going to go with the usability report. Different people will have different amounts of time that you might wish to allow them to be allocated to projects based upon what they do for a living. So someone, for example, like Meredith, who has many different hats in the company, probably doesn't have a lot of time to do client-facing work, whereas someone in professional services, the vast majority of their time is going to be done on client-facing work. So Meredith might only be utilizable something like 20 hours a week, where somebody else might be utilizable 35 hours a week, giving them an hour a day for other administrative tasks that they might have to do. Now, as we can see here, throughout the course of this month, which is the period that we ran this for, you can see how many actual hours various people have worked. Using myself as an example, I've got 141.25 hours, of which 131.75 I'm allowed to be assigned to do something or other. And you can see those numbers are going to be different for different people. My target utilization is 80%. My actual utilization during this period was 78.4%, so it looks like I'm pretty much on target with what I'm doing. And my variance isn't very high as a result of that, minus 1.58. I'm a little bit under what my target goal is, as opposed to John Matalozzo, who sadly is minus 42.5%. Maybe he went on vacation that week. So as you can see, I've got 94.25 billable hours, which is fantastic. And as you can see, my chargeability variance in this case is going to be just a little bit under what target happens to be. This is a good idea to get a quick overview of how your people are actually spending their time in relation to what you hope they do. And a lot of times people can use things like this, for information snapshots that allow them to change how people are utilized, what people are spending their time doing, or pulling valuable resources with very high-end skill sets off of administrative tasks that can be done by somebody else within the organization. So it provides you with a layer of business intelligence that you can apply in the real world with really fairly small data sets. Now notice that at the top of the screen here, there's a bunch of blue buttons: past period, view as, save as HTML, view as plain text, and future period. Let's go look at past period. So because we ran this for 1 month, going from the 1st of March to the 31st of March, when we go to past period, it's going to think back 1 month exactly. And it's smart enough to know that February only had 28 days. Now, if I look at myself for that exact same time period, I can see that my utilization variance then was minus 16.25, which was a lot worse than what it was before, and my billing variance was minus 70, which is just terrible. So you can get an overview of each month in a snapshot, or of course you could have run this for a longer time period, which would have told you, in effect, the same data. But anytime you want to see the breakdown, you certainly can. Now, returning to the main menu of reports, I'd like to take a quick look at the first billable forecast report, Meredith. Now, this billable forecast report for customer 00135 is specifically done on one client. Note that I didn't select a specific date range at the outset, opting instead to enter a specific time based on whatever it is that that I choose at the moment I'm running the report. So go ahead and run that, and this is going to basically give me an idea of how my time is supposed to be spent from a forecasting perspective. So notice that we're looking into the future in this particular case based on assignments that we've made. So I've got my client and then the various projects that we're doing for the client. Notice it's telling us the project type, in this case, is time and materials. You can have fields like project type that basically tell you if it's fixed bid, T&M, what have you. Whatever you wish to define, you certainly can. The product is extremely flexible, as many of you know. And as you can see here, this is breaking down the billable hours by month, as well as the unassigned hours by month, giving you an indication of where you're at versus the roadmap of where you're supposed to be. If we look between the, for example, billable amounts in 4/2014 versus in the center column 5/2014, you can essentially see what your future plan is based upon the allocations you made in the project, in the product, sorry, in the project for that matter. Go ahead, Meredith, and click on reports, please, again. And let's take a look at the scheduled project status report that I made, which is actually called the scheduled project status report. So I'm going to take a look at that. Now, this report looks very much like a dashboard. It contains a massive amount of information. Anyone that is using Project Execute right now has probably seen this in the dashboard views. And with this report, you're able to actually drill into a lot of detailed information if you wish. So I've got it looking at a fairly high level right now. As you can see, Meredith is hovering over the hours graph right now, which essentially allows you to click into any segment of any project that you've assigned out to people for any time period and get an understanding of exactly what's going on with it. This is probably the single most powerful report, in my opinion, for Project Execute that the system offers within the standard report interface. As I'm sure all of you have seen the very impressive Reportlink, which will allow you to have Excel dashboards. Well, this essentially is giving you a dashboard inside Journyx. Now, please note that within any one of these projects, such as procurement and delivery, you can drill down and see the lower levels of a project. You can also click on one of the project names and actually get in and modify them directly, which is fantastic. So for ease of navigation, a lot of times people prefer to do things directly within the product like this. If you continue to scroll down, you'll see that this is actually a giant report doing tens of thousands of calculations. Note that it ran almost immediately. Now, towards the bottom here, we can see that there's a couple of graphs that we put on here. Since I just ran this on a finite set of projects here, note that I've got my budgeted revenue report here on cost to date for custom application ID, and then my budgeted cost, which is much, much lower. Looks like we're going to kill it on that project. Likewise, on percent complete, this is showing my schedule complete versus my budget complete. In other words, how long we think it's going to take versus where we're at actually right now. And on custom application development, you can see we're creeping up there. We're only about 75 to 80% of the way through it. You can obviously drill into any one of these things to any level of specificity that you wish. That gives you a fairly good overview of some of these standard formats for project execute report types. Any one of these can be modified in any way you like, and of course you can create a limitless amount of these. In fact, the last 4 reports you've seen, I created in about 5 minutes. So one final thing I would like to cover real quickly under the reports menu is rate reports. Now, rate reports are financial reports within the product, and they allow you to factor in things like business rules on the back end that might cause a change to basic financial calculations that otherwise you could just do in a standard total cost report, pulling things straight from a user data field. But if you've got things like overtime calculations or client discounts or rate changes over time periods, and you want those to be reflected in reports that you can see in the product, you absolutely can. So I've created a report here called Sample Rate Report. Meredith, please go ahead and run that. Now these can also feed into Reportlink. And as you can see here, what I've done is basically just taken a bunch of projects. Within the projects, I'm showing activities. Within the activities, I'm showing people. So if we look at Conduct Pilot, for example, halfway down our list here, we see that we had a variety of activities. And on testing specifically, we had a boatload of people doing it. Looks like it's a good thing this was billable because we spent so much time on it. And of course, you can see not only the number of hours that people worked and what their costs were, you can also see their effective rates for that specific project, that specific activity for that specific time period, and also the amount that ends up getting turned into a bill. You'll notice that these rates are all over the map. In my opinion, this is one of the greatest features of our product because it gives you the possibility of running a report from anywhere in the world as long as you have an internet connection that tells you financial data that normally you can only derive from your accounting system. And many, many people that are probably on this call right now really don't have access to run reports or create reports that directly query the accounting system. So they have to rely upon others to do it. But in seconds, they can make one in Journyx as long as they're authorized to do so based upon the role permissions within our product, and can see this type of data from anywhere. So it's a nice capability to have in understanding your job costs and understanding activity-based costing, doing cost center tracking, anything like that can completely be done within the product. Once again, every field in Journyx is reportable as long as you wish for it to be. So if you had back-end data fields relating to your projects or relating to your people or relating to your activities or anything else the user might select on the time sheet, then you certainly can run reports on things like department, location, client, etc. So that essentially concludes my portion of the presentation.